In a small village, by the shore of a tranquil river, lived a young monk named Kaito. Since his arrival at the monastery, he had dedicated himself to meditation and the study of sacred texts. However, his mind could not find rest. He often found himself trapped in the memories of his past. The unspoken words, the wrong decisions, the missed opportunities. And at times, his mind wandered into worries about the future, what had yet to come and the uncertainties awaiting him. One day, the Zen master, an elderly man with a deep and serene gaze, called him to his side while walking through the monastery garden. Kaito, always eager to learn, bowed respectfully. "Master," Kaito said with an uncertain voice, "how can I find peace when my mind is trapped in the past and the future?" The master smiled slightly, as if he already knew the question before it was asked, and pointed to the river flowing nearby. "Look at the river, Kaito. The water never stops. It always flows. It doesn't linger in the past nor waits for the future. It simply is what it is in this moment." Kaito watched in silence, but his mind was still filled with noise. How could he reach that state of serenity? The master continued, his voice soft like the murmur of water. "The past is gone, and the future has not yet arrived. If you cling to either, you will lose the one thing you truly have, the present moment." Kaito remained silent, but his thoughts kept traveling between what had been and what could be. Could it be possible to let go of all that and simply be in the now? The next morning, the master summoned Kaito for a special task. He asked him to accompany an elderly gardener named Hiroshi, who cared for the monastery gardens with great dedication. Hiroshi was a humble man, but his hands, though wrinkled with age, moved the tools with a calm that Kaito had never seen before. "Today, Kaito," said the master, "I want you to work in silence with Hiroshi. Watch how he does it, but most importantly, watch how he does it in the present." Kaito, though curious, felt an inner discomfort. What could he possibly learn from a simple garden when his mind was still trapped in its frantic search for peace? When they arrived at the garden, Hiroshi began to work. With a rake, he patiently moved the earth, his movements precise and fluid. There was no hurry. He didn't seem concerned with how much work there was to do or how much time would pass. Every gesture was in harmony with the surroundings. The sound of his tools in the earth, the scent of the plants, and the distant song of a bird all seemed to blend into a single symphony. Kaito tried to follow his example, but soon his mind began to wander. He thought about his childhood, his family, everything he had left behind. He also imagined the future, life outside the monastery, the challenges that awaited him. Hiroshi watched him silently for a moment and then said, without looking at him, "Kaito, why do you let the wind of your thoughts pull you away from the ground beneath your feet? The present is here. There is no other place to go." Kaito, surprised by Hiroshi's words, tried to focus on his task, but the anxiety still lingered in his mind. "How do you manage not to think about the past or the future?" Kaito asked sincerely. Hiroshi smiled gently, without stopping his work. "Every time a flower blooms, it blooms only in this moment. It doesn't bloom because of what was, or because of what will be. It blooms because it is being here and now. You too are like that flower, Kaito. Don't let yourself be caught by the wind of thoughts." Kaito tried to keep working, but his thoughts kept escaping. He didn't fully understand what the gardener meant, but something in his words resonated within him. Something told him that he still hadn't grasped what it truly meant to live fully in the present moment. That night, after a long day of work in the garden, Kaito walked alone along the riverbank. The moonlight reflected off the water, creating silver flashes that danced gently on the surface. Kaito sat on a stone near the shore, feeling the cool night air brush against his face. His mind was still restless, trapped in the memories of his former life and the uncertainties of the future. He looked at the water and thought about the words of the master and the gardener. How could he achieve what they had said? How could he stop the constant flow of thoughts that kept him from living fully in the now? It was then that he saw something that caught his attention. In the water, the moon was reflected perfectly, as an exact copy of itself. However, as Kaito watched, a gentle current began to move the surface of the river. The moon's image began to distort, the ripples breaking its reflection, making it appear fragmented and confused. Kaito watched with fascination as the moon's reflection moved with the river. The moon never tried to control the ripples, nor did it worry about how its image appeared. It simply was in the sky being what it was, while the water flowed without stopping. The river never stops, and the moon doesn't mind the reflections that distort. Kaito said to himself softly, "The reflection is just a moment, like my life." At that moment, he understood something profound. The moon's reflection didn't cling to its form nor worry about how it looked. It simply was as it was and allowed the water to transform it without resisting the natural flow. Kaito closed his eyes and took a deep breath, feeling the fresh air fill his lungs. The restlessness in his mind began to ease, and for a brief moment, he felt at peace. He felt that the present moment, as fleeting as the reflection in the water, was all he truly needed. But at the same time, he knew he had to learn to stay there longer, not to be swept away by the past or the future. The next day, the Zen master called Kaito once again. This time, he didn't give him a specific task. Instead, he said, "Today, Kaito, I ask you to seek silence in everything you do. Do not speak to yourself, nor allow your mind to wander. Just act in the present without thinking about what was or what could be. Only the now." Kaito, though intrigued, didn't fully understand what was being asked of him, but he decided to follow the master's instructions and, for the first time, dedicated himself to his daily tasks without speaking to himself, without planning or reflecting. He got up early, cleaned the paths of the monastery, prepared the herbs for tea, all in complete silence. At first, the task seemed simple, but soon his mind began to rebel. He remembered past conversations, old decisions that still weighed on him, and worried about his future. Would he ever find peace? Was he really fulfilling what was asked of him? As he cleaned a small corner of the garden, he saw an ant carrying a leaf much larger than its own body. Kaito watched for a moment, noticing how, without hurry or doubt, the ant moved step by step, dragging its load with determination, without looking back or toward the future. In that instant, something shifted inside him. Kaito stopped thinking and completely devoted himself to observing the ant. Every movement, every step, seemed to be in total harmony with the present moment. The ant didn't worry about the past nor rush to reach the future. It was completely absorbed in its task, without any distraction. Kaito then realized that living in the present wasn't something that could be forced with the mind. It was more like allowing oneself to be carried by the natural flow of life, without resistance. Just as the ant carried its leaf, he too must carry his thoughts and actions without trying to control them. The master, who had been watching from a distance, slowly approached. "Do you see, Kaito? The mind is like the wind, always moving from one side to the other. But when we stop, like the ant in its task, we find peace. It is not necessary to fight with the thoughts. Just let them come and go while you focus on what you truly have before you, the present." Kaito nodded, feeling a slight smile on his face. Something had changed inside him. For the first time, he felt that the present moment wasn't just what needed to be done, but the only thing that truly existed. The next day, the master took Kaito to a hill that overlooked the entire village. It was a peaceful place, where the wind often blew freely, without obstacles. The master sat on a flat rock, and Kaito imitated him, observing the landscape that stretched before them. The wind blew gently, moving the leaves of the trees and carrying some seeds through the air. Kaito closed his eyes and listened to the murmur of the wind, feeling how its presence expanded through his body. It was as if the wind was speaking, bringing with it a subtle message that he still didn't fully understand. "Master," Kaito said, opening his eyes, "the wind seems so free, so untamable. How can I learn to be as fluid, as present as it is, without my mind distracting me with the past and the future?" The master, with his serene gaze, looked at the horizon, where the sky and earth met in an embrace. Then he looked at Kaito and said, "The wind doesn't worry about its past, nor does it anticipate its future. It simply is in this moment. It doesn't need to control its direction because it flows with the landscape that surrounds it. If you ever feel that your thoughts are dragging you, remember the wind. It doesn't cling to anything. It simply adapts to the space that welcomes it." Kaito listened attentively, but it was still hard for him to imagine how he, a human being full of memories and desires, could reach that peace. "But I am not the wind, master. My mind doesn't stop. It's always trapped in what was or what will be." The master smiled gently. His gaze softened, and he pointed to the ground beneath their feet. "Look at the ground, Kaito. There are stones, fallen leaves, and intertwined roots. All of this has been here for a long time. Some stones were shaped by the wind, others by the rain, and some will never move. But they are all here without worrying about tomorrow, simply living in the now. You, like them, can also learn to be in the present moment, without clinging to the past or the future." Kaito looked at the stones, the roots, and for a moment, he felt the air around him grow lighter. The tension in his body began to fade. There was something in the way the wind moved, in how the stones remained where they were, that invited him to let go of his worries. The wind continued to blow, bringing with it the peace of nature. Kaito began to breathe more deeply, feeling his breath align with the flow of the wind. Each exhalation seemed to carry away some of the inner unrest that had accompanied him for so long. Finally, he realized that the master was not asking him to free himself from his thoughts, but to accept them, just as the wind accepts its own movement, without struggle, just flowing with them. Several weeks had passed since that day on the hill, and Kaito began to practice with more awareness in every task he performed. Although his thoughts still appeared, he no longer saw them as something he needed to reject or control. Instead, he observed them as the waves of a sea that came and went, without clinging to any. One afternoon, the master asked him to accompany him to a more secluded part of the monastery, deep in the forest. As they walked in silence, Kaito noticed how the landscape gradually changed. The trees became denser, the air cooler, and the sound of the birds seemed to disappear as they advanced. It was as if, little by little, they were entering another world, a deeper place, far removed from everyday concerns. Finally, they arrived at a small cave where the master stopped. The entrance was narrow, and the sunlight barely reached the inside. Without saying a word, the master invited Kaito to enter. "This is the center," the master said as he entered, pointing to the shadows that stretched along the rocky walls. Kaito sat in silence while the master did the same. "The center of what, master?" asked Kaito, intrigued. "The center of yourself," the master answered gently. "This place represents stillness, the space where everything external disappears and only the essential remains. In this place, there is no past or future, only the present moment." Kaito looked around, noticing the darkness that surrounded them. It was a place that invited him into deep silence, a silence that seemed to fill his entire being. In that space, his normally active mind seemed to calm naturally. However, he still struggled with the thoughts that appeared now and then. "Master," Kaito said softly, "how can I always live in the present? Like this place? Every time I try, thoughts drag me, taking me to the past or pushing me into the future." The master, with his calm gaze, answered, "The center is not outside, Kaito. It is not in this place, nor in the next. The center is in you, in your ability to be aware of what you are in this moment. Thoughts are like passing clouds, but your essence, your being, is like the sky that is always present. Do not identify with the clouds. Observe the sky." Kaito closed his eyes and breathed deeply. He tried to visualize that stillness, that vast serenity that didn't depend on what was happening around him. He remembered the master's words about the wind, the stones, and the ants living in the present moment. Now he understood that all of this was not just a concept, but an experience he could live within himself. As the silence deepened, Kaito felt as though the walls of the cave disappeared. The space no longer mattered, nor did time. Only he and his breath. There was no past or future. There was only a heartbeat, a sigh, an eternal moment. The lesson the master offered him was not intellectual knowledge, but a direct experience. The center was not found by searching outside, but it arose when one stopped seeking, when one allowed oneself to be, simply be. After several hours of meditation in the cave, the master slowly stood up and pointed toward the entrance, where the light of the sunset was beginning to enter. "It's time to return," he said, his voice as soft as the wind rising outside. Kaito, still immersed in the stillness of the cave, slowly got up. Something inside him had changed. He felt lighter, more aware of the present moment. The cave, which at first had seemed like an isolated and gloomy space, now appeared to be the most peaceful refuge he had ever known, a reminder that the center was within himself, wherever he went. As they walked outside, the sunlight began to soften, bathing the forest in golden and orange hues. Kaito took a deep breath, feeling the fresh air envelop him, and for a moment, all thoughts disappeared. There was only the forest, the wind, and himself. He no longer felt the tension of anxiety or the weight of memories. Everything had dissolved into the simplicity of the now. The master walked beside him, his presence so calm that Kaito couldn't help but feel more at peace. As they moved forward, the wind began to blow harder, moving the leaves around them and creating a sound almost like music. Kaito closed his eyes for a moment, letting himself be enveloped by the sound. In that instant, he felt how everything he had learned in the cave settled inside him, like a seed planted in his heart. "Master, I understand now," Kaito said with a serene smile. "The wind never stops, but it doesn't stir unnecessarily either. It follows its course, no matter the stones it encounters, no matter the branches it crosses. This is the mind. I must allow the thoughts to come and go without trying to capture them, without trying to stop them." The master nodded slowly, his gaze full of approval. "The wind doesn't cling to anything, not even its own direction. The past is gone, and the future has not yet arrived. Life is in this moment, Kaito, in every step, in every breath, in every thought that arises and fades away. Only when you stop clinging to anything can the present be fully yours." Kaito walked alongside the master, feeling each step lighter than the last. The forest that surrounded him no longer seemed like a distant or unfamiliar place. Every tree, every stone, every leaf seemed to be a part of him, and he a part of all of it. Finally, he understood that living in the present was not just a technique or a discipline. It was a way of being, a natural acceptance of the flow of life. And as they walked toward the monastery, Kaito didn't think about what he had done or what he should do. He was just there, in that moment, walking with the rhythm of the wind, his heart open to the mystery of the now. As the day came to an end, Kaito and the master returned to the monastery. The gentle evening breeze accompanied them, and the sun began to hide behind the mountains, tinting the sky with shades of pink and purple. Everything seemed to move slowly, as if time itself had entered a state of rest, allowing them to fully live in the present. Kaito sat in front of the monastery door, watching the last lights of the day as the master sat beside him in silence. There was no need for words at that moment. The sky was speaking to them through its stillness. The air filtered through the leaves of the trees, and the distant sound of a stream seemed like a whisper that filled the space with its constant flow. The master, observing Kaito's calm, finally spoke. "Today you have taken an important step, Kaito. You have understood that peace is not in a distant future, nor in a faraway past. Peace is here in this moment. All you need to do is remember this. Living fully in the present is the path to freedom." Kaito nodded, but something new shone in his eyes. He no longer viewed the future with fear or nostalgia, nor the past with regret. What was left for him to do was simply exist, in harmony with the present moment, just as the wind did, effortlessly, without expectations, just being. The master slowly stood up, with the same grace with which he had lived the entire day. He slightly bowed to Kaito and offered him one final teaching. "Remember, Kaito, do not seek beyond the present moment. In the present, you find everything you need. The past no longer has power over you, and the future only comes when the present allows it. Like the wind that never stops, only flows, you too can live without attachment, without haste, just being." Kaito looked at the master, and for a moment, he understood that everything he had sought, everything he had longed for, was already within him. The master had not given him concrete answers, but had guided him to discover the truth within himself. With one last deep breath, Kaito closed his eyes, letting the wind caress his face. There was nothing left to seek. It was only him, the master, the wind, and the present moment. And so, in that tranquil peace, Kaito fully understood. Pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. The only moment that truly exists is this, the present, and with this sigh, he let go of everything that was not him. The wind embraced him, and Kaito, finally, dissolved into it.